How can we know or confirm our God-given giftings? What resources might help us discover or better understand our gifts? In today's episode, we continue our interview with Dr. Marianne Herr on identifying your God-given gifts. Welcome to the Jesus People Sisterhood podcast, a place where Christian single women aged 50 plus connect. I am your host, Janine Jordan, a Christian confidence coach and leadership mentor in Alberta, Canada.
And I'm your co-host, Ellie McCormick, a Christian longevity coach and mentor in the USA. Being single women over 50, we know what it's like to feel overlooked, to have unrealized dreams, to experience the challenges of singlehood, and to be concerned about what our future will look like. We couldn't find anything online for single Christian women over 50, so we created Jesus People Sisterhood just for you, a place where sisters encourage and empower one another through the last third of life, because you are a treasure trove of wisdom and of exceedingly great value. This is an authentic community, a supportive family, with other women on the same journey where Jesus is the center of it all. Here you will find real talk, real community, and real sisters.
Join us as we discuss building relationships, whole health, and growing spiritually. We'll review helpful books and articles, chat with guest speakers, share success stories, and have some laughs along the way. So grab your favorite beverage and we'll get started. Welcome, sisters, to this episode of the Jesus People Sisterhood podcast, the only podcast specifically for single Christian women over 50. Today, we give a shout out to our sisters in the United Arab Emirates. Thank you for listening. Today's episode is part 2 of our interview with Dr. Marianne Herr on identifying your God-given gifts. If you have not listened to part 1, please go back and listen to the previous episode 32, first. Marianne Herr is a gospel minister, life coach, writer, and CEO of Created for More. Her teaching and writing encourage believers to live victoriously despite adverse circumstances. Her primary focus is hearing God's voice, cultivating an intimate relationship with God to discover your identity, how God has equipped you, and how to be aligned with God's purpose. We pick up the interview where we left off last week on identifying your God-given gifts.
But I would also like something to say about the power of imagination, because the Bible contains examples of positive and negative imaginations. Therefore, we as mature Christian women, we have learned to distinguish between the two. I am very sure of that. Now, some negative examples of imagination would, of course, be when the people tried to build the Tower of Babel because they wanted to do that and come up to God. That was Genesis 11:6. And God prevented them from being able to do so. But in a way, God said, if you can imagine it, it can be done. Corinthians 10:4-5 also reminds us that we have to cast down negative imaginations and see the positive things. And now let's look at some positive imagination. For example, Isaiah 26:3. I would like to read that verse. You will guard him and keep in perfect peace whose mind, both its inclination and its character, is stayed on you, because he commits himself to you, leans on you, and hopes confidently in you. Now, apparently that word mind here is the word for imagination in Hebrew. And we can see things in our imagination, we can dream, and we should dream big with God, and then see it already happening. And of course, also, Ephesians 3:20 says, now to him who is able to carry out his purposes and do superabundantly more than all we dare ask or think, infinitely beyond our greatest prayers, hopes, or dreams, according to his power that is at work within us. Now, I am not talking about prosperity gospel here, like name it, claim it. No, I'm talking about allowing God to place visions and dreams into our hearts, and we are taking those and seeing them fulfilled. We just keep seeing them, keep thinking about them, keep praying about them. There's also in Hebrews 11:1, it talks about the substance of things hoped for, and that's our imagination. Hope is a positive imagination, and hope, as it says in Hebrews 6:19, is the anchor of our soul. Then, of course, we are also reminded that our faith, which is the faith of Jesus inside of us, overcomes the world. It's John who says that in his first letter in chapter 5, verse 4. And then, of course, I don't think I have mentioned Jesus' exhortation for us to heal the sick, cast out demons, and raise the dead. Again, there is a lot of literature and people who have witnessed physical healing in their ministries. One of my former pastors used to say, these things are not taught, but caught. In other words, expose yourself to people who see a lot of healing in their ministry. Also, in this context, I would like to recommend books by Dave Hayes, better known as Praying Medic. He wrote a series of books called ... Made Simple. For example, Divine Healing Made Simple, or Dream Interpretation Made Simple, Hearing God's Voice Made Simple, Power and Authority Made Simple, and many more. I mean, they're really very easy read, very clear, and totally founded on scriptures. I have read a few of those. I found them extremely helpful. Of course, we will not limit God with small thinking. He is a big God, and he has big plans. And he only needs a woman who says, I trust you and I'm willing. And we don't need to be able to make sense of it all. All we need to do is trust God. He knows what he's doing, and when we follow his voice, he's responsible for the outcome. That's a relief and good news. I'd like to state it all in just one or two sentences. We have access to God's promises. And there is so much more than I just listed. And I'm sure you can add more to all of that. There is much to do when you consider that you are to use your gift mix every day in your 9-to-5 job, Monday through Friday, as well as in your leisure time. And the relaxed way of approaching all those gifts would be to ask, does Jesus have access to our hearts and minds to be himself through us and as us, and work all these gifts through us and into the world?
So going back to when you mentioned the parable about the talents, I think a lot of times, I don't know if ladies relate to it, but it seems to me a lot of older ladies do seem like the guy who received one talent and just kind of hid it, whether it's because they are lukewarm, or I think for a lot of ladies, it's just that, again, like you mentioned, the orphan spirit of thinking that we really aren't that gifted, and also fear of putting ourselves out there. We're just going to choose the
Yeah.
least risky way to live, and that is by just burying the money, burying the gift,
Mm-hmm.
so that, hey, that's going to make it through,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not stepping out. And so, how can we encourage one another to pursue or operate in our giftings, to step out and trust the Lord and to do something with the life that he's given us, which is really, we're living for him. It's not for us. So how can we encourage women to not just bury that talent?
Yeah. Of course, to be very specific to that answer depends, of course, what exactly we are pursuing, or maybe we don't even know yet what we are pursuing. But I think what's important is find a group of believers who want more from God and believe that God wants to use us more excellently. Yeah. And for me personally, I'd just like to talk a little bit about what I have experienced. I've been connected to two dear sisters that are pursuing similar goals to mine, and we usually meet weekly online to share insights, ideas, achievements, also frustrations. We share prayer requests and encourage one another. And sometimes we even have a word from God for one person or the other person. And just a few weeks ago, I was sitting praying and journaling because I love doing that, listening to God and then write down what comes to my mind. And then I said, it was 1 hour before we were meeting, I asked God, now, what word do you have for my sister? And God began speaking. I wrote it all down. It did not make any sense to me. And I felt really silly telling her what I had heard. But to her, it made sense, and it was total confirmation for something that she was just going through. Now, that is just an encouragement. Never think what you heard God say is irrelevant, even if it does not make sense to you. I mean, all that can happen is that it really doesn't make sense for the other person either. So what? It doesn't matter. You heard something and you said it. And maybe it makes sense later or immediately, or maybe not. So that's just about hearing God's voice. I would say keep practicing, because hearing God's voice is a gift also that needs to be honed through regular practice. And if you want to understand and practice spiritual gifts, read books that encourage their use and give ideas for practicing them. And it might just be a start, reading books. For myself, I've read books by Jane Hammond on discernment, dreams, and visions, or books by Emma Stark on the prophetic, or John Maxwell on developing leadership skills. Or there's a book called Chase the Lion, subtitled If Your Dream Doesn't Scare You, It's Too Small by Mark Batterson. Or Born to Create, subtitled Stepping into Your Supernatural Destiny by Teresa Detman. Or Emotional Healthy Spirituality by Peter Scazzero, and many others. I mean, just reading some books, it opens up your mind and your heart, and it might just give you a hunger for more. And that is what I think is so important, and find people to share it with, because we have read together in that group that I mentioned, we have read books together and then share insights and pray it in and see what God is speaking to all of us. Now, about how to encourage one another, actually, I'm in an English-speaking house group, and I just put that question in not long ago, asked how do we actually encourage one another to exercise spiritual gifts, or that they will come out, because it has been a subject for us lately. Now, the pastor's wife, she said, first, we must have fellowship with one another so that we can observe the gift the Lord is using one for another at this time in their walk. So that's her observation, observing how is God, what gifting is this person actually walking in, doesn't even notice it. Bring it out more. Now, one of my close friends sent me the following. She said, I would just encourage people to remember those moments when they felt to conversion of their gifting and God's timing. Each of us has had those moments in time where we felt like we were doing something that felt so right at the moment that we could do it forever. And it didn't feel like work. It was a free flow of who we are. That may be helpful if we remember those moments and ask God to direct us to develop our skills to do more in the future. So that's being very observant about what's happening with me in this or that situation. And a friend of mine from church said the following: I need to be surrounded by people that challenge me and call me or the gift in me out. I have to put myself in situations where there is no excuse or getting away with. For example, when I'm assigned to teach or called out to pray or prophesy, I always grow. So it's having people who dare to challenge you, knowing the gift is already in us in its fullness, and of course, having an attitude of being willing to step out and do it. That's very important also because sometimes we just get very shy and we fear making mistakes and we just don't want to open up ourselves. And I think she has described this really well and saying that she always grows when she opens herself up and dares to step out. Another friend said, I learned a lot when talking to leaders or friends. They shared their impressions. Then I tried gifts like prophetic words or being a mercy shower and faith, and then they gave me feedback. And that helped me a lot to learn as a young Christian. Also, sometimes in prayer meetings in our church, we sit somebody on a chair and then we stand around and we just pray and we ask God, what do you have for this person? And we speak it out and pray it over this person. And then, of course, the person, we are always to prove what's true and what's right. So that's always in the person who receives responsibility. But I think it's also a great way to practice these things. Of course, there's so much more you can do, and just keep asking God and trust Him to lead you well, even if it might seem nonsensical. And what I would say, it's such a great adventure. It is actually great fun to keep moving ahead with God and to keep stepping into more of what He has for you. And there might be this little fear barrier, but as I said, get together with a group of friends who have the same thing in mind, keep encouraging you and practicing, and just go step by step, because God leads us from grace to grace. Yeah, I think that's what I would like to say about that.
Yeah. And it's really important who our friends are, who we hang out with.
Mm. Yes, that's
Mhm.
true. Very true.
Mhm. I think those are really good suggestions for encouraging one another. And I would just have one question here. So, what would you like to say to Christian women over 50 regarding identifying their God-given gifts now? That would be the final question I have.
Mm. Well, identifying the God-given gifts, I think there are, you can do tests, read books, pray with others,
Mhm.
and just listening to God, allow Him to lead you and find out, oh, there was a situation actually, I did that, and that came so natural. Maybe I should think more about that and ask God if that is something that He would like me to do more. But another thing that comes to mind is that I once read a book a long time ago, and I read it in German. It's a German book, but the lady titled the book At Last Over 40. And the subtitle was The World Belongs to the Mature Woman.
Mm.
Now she related how many women believe the lie that with 40 the joys of life have ended and that now there is mere existence but no living. She told of women who learned to ski at a mature age, started painting, and had their first exhibit with 80, and many more excellent examples of women who dared to defy the status quo and follow their heart's desire. As far as I can remember, the author wasn't a believer, so she didn't draw strength from a close relationship with Jesus. I never forgot that book. It made a lasting impression on me, even when I was not nearly 40. And of course, as Christian women, highly gifted by God, because that's what we are. We know we can do much more than we anticipate, because God has entrusted us with so many things. And I mentioned above that we are His workmanship to do good works, which means we have been created perfectly because God creates everything perfectly. But in the Greek original text, it does not say workmanship, it says poetry.
Mm. Yeah.
We have been created His poetry. So we are a poem. I love that, the idea of a poem, because it speaks of an unfolding. So I think also when feeling dissatisfied and lacking ideas, dreams, or visions, I have found that by becoming still before God and giving Him a chance to speak to my spirit, He downloads ideas. He gives me the next step of his plan or the following line of the poem. So I would encourage people to just take stock of all your giftings and think of everything you have already done in life, the successes and even the failures, because they too hold learning potential, and dare to dream big. As the saying goes, you're not dreaming big enough if you can do it without God. And I would like to say also a word of caution. Beware of those who would not share your ideas and might think you are too ambitious. Those people will not cheer you on, and they might even seek to discourage you from moving ahead. Instead, find sisters of likewise precious faith who will share all the crazy and fantastic ideas and cheer you on. Look for women who have achieved fantastic results at a mature age. Keep learning from them and be encouraged. You can find many examples in history, in the present world, also in the Bible. You can achieve much more than you could ever think or imagine.
So encouraging. Thank you for that. Yes. Even though we're more mature, we certainly have more work and more things to do for the Lord. Yeah. Mhm.
Yes, there's always more to do, and we have so much more expertise, life experience. We do it in much greater wisdom, drawing on everything we have learned. And we have to remind ourselves of that. We have so many advantages because we have already lived life for a number of years. We have learned and so many things in us that we can share out to others.
Thank you so much for coming back on the podcast, Marianne. Could you please share with our listeners how they can connect with you?
Yes, I'm not such a tech person, but I do have a website. It's actually, my ministry is called Created for More, but you can access the website on marianneherr.com. You can find me on Facebook under my name, also on Instagram. I think I have also a few little videos on YouTube. I have a free download on my website, which you can just download. It's a PDF. And I have a couple of ebooks. One is a devotional, and actually that devotional you can also receive in print. It's a 31-day emotional. It's living successful in challenging times, where I encourage people just to think and meditate on Bible verses. I'm not picking Bible verses and interpret them, but I just give examples. And at first, I just talk generally a little bit about what happens when we go through difficult times. So that's either on Amazon or you can get it from me through the mail. It's in English or German or Spanish. And there is another Kindle ebook called Trading Religion for Relationship, where I basically talk about 3 challenging times in my life and how God used those to teach me more about himself and reveal who he was for me.
Okay, well, great. Thank you so much.
I think there's also actually, I am also on LinkedIn, but I am not very regular or very frequent. When I get something from God, I feel, oh, this is something I want to write about, then that's what I do. And I don't have a plan to do things. I just try to go according to that poem as God unfolds it line by line, so to speak.
Okay.
Well, thank you for being with us today. We've certainly feel encouraged, and I'm sure that our ladies will as well.
Thank you so much. It was all my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please share any thoughts that resonated with you from today's podcast episode in our private Facebook group at Jesus People Sisterhood Community. Start reaching out to other single women and create your local group of Jesus People Sisters. Please let us know about your group to add to our directory by contacting us at support@JesusPeopleSisterhood.com.
Have you had a good experience with a business? They've treated you honestly and helped you at a reasonable price? Please let us know. We would like to start a directory of JPS-friendly businesses. Let's care for one another.
Be blessed by him who is able to protect you from stumbling and to make you stand in the presence of his glory, blameless and with great joy. Until next time.
Hey, sister, before you go, thank you for listening. If you found value in today's podcast, the best way to say thank you is by leaving a 5-star written review at Apple Podcasts. That raises us in the rankings and helps other sisters find us too. And please tell a friend or post it on your social media. If you're a single Christian woman over 50, this podcast was created specifically for you. The Jesus People Sisterhood is your community to find support and friendship with other sisters who can understand. Be sure to follow us on your podcast app and join our free private Facebook group at Jesus People Sisterhood Community.
Jesus People Sisterhood has also started a private Facebook group for housing and co-living opportunities. You can check that out at Jesus People Sisterhood Senior Housing. You can also find us on Facebook at Jesus People Sisterhood and individually for Janine at riseupcoachingandconsulting.com and for Ellie at samaramountain.com. And ladies, this is the necessary disclaimer. Our podcast content is for informational purposes and does not constitute professional advice from mental health, medical, legal, financial, or other areas. The opinions of the guest do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the hosts. It is our heart that this podcast will be a blessing to you. Together, let's build a powerful sisterhood with Jesus. Make a friend, add a sister, across the border and around the world.